Here it's another advanced level history lecture, specifically in exam coaching. I was revealing how to answer questions related to the French Revolution. So enjoy, subscribe the video, like and share. Usually is wapedza kudhila nani nazvo. Tikubatana. So in this case, our question reads, what contributed most to the crisis of 1789? What contributed most to the contributed the most to the crisis of 1789? What happened in 1789 was the outbreak of the French Revolution. So in this they say, an incompetent king, ambitious nobility, and poor harvest. So as for me, I urge you to use the incompetent king on the affirmative side. Then on the non-affirmative side, you can use the contribution of the nobility or poor harvest. But in this case, you are not obliged to be. Hauna kumanikidzwa. Waigona kutotanga nepoor harvest. Bosi vangobvunza kuti pane ichi neichi. Hanzi mubvunzo uyu wakafanana nekuti zvanzi tine chingwa chedu proton, bakers ini nelobels. Pazvingwa izvi ndezvipi chipi chaunofunga kuti chinopedza kana uchimwa tii? Ndozvikutaura. Saka iwewe uri kupuhwa mukana wekusarudza kuti inini hangu ndofarira proton, asi wochizotitsanangurira kuti sei iwewe wati proton ndo chaicho, kana wati bakers ini sei wadaro. Are we together? So mukuzobuditsa nyaya ndo pane problem yenyu kuti many candidates, as I used to say, vanofunga kuti kuexplaina zvinhu kana kuti kunyora nyaya zvafanana nekuti kana uchida kutinyorera about American War of Independence, hausi kufanira kutiudza kuti hondo yakaitika sei. Tiudze effect of the American War of Independence. Kuno kuti nomaka brain dzako iwewo paunotanga kuti ndazofunga izvozvo ndo zvatakuda, ndo dzinodzi analysis. Tikubatana. Explanation yekuti papoor harvest vanhu vakabva kumusha, munhu wese ari kutoziva kuti kwakaitika nzara. But how does the poor harvest contributed to the outbreak of the French Revolution? Ndo pane bottom line. So I'm just going to explain just a few of the points here. Munogona kundiselectera one up. No explain. In this case, what I want to do, I want to give you a glimpse of introduction. I want to explain a point. I just want to lay out this note up and I explain a point. Up and I die. Sarudza ikasika tuma shure kweta. Zvakapusa zvamuri kusarudza izvozvo. Ai adedi mangovharwa nechirungu ipapa imwe yacho. Shudza. He was weak-willed. Yeah, this one was the first, this one is the second. All right. What else? Kuno nobility. They always supported the king. This is point 3. Then here. Nana, apa toto raiba. Decline in trade. All right. Right. So, I just want to explore or to review kuti uno answer say. Saka in this case, whenever you are writing your essay, we have explained that we have got different type of introduction. We have got what we call the miniskirt approach, the signpost approach, then the general approach. These are the three which I have taught you. Ndo some of the best. Mamwariko. But iwe unofana kuziva hatina suda kutaura kuti introduction. So in this case, waigona kutotanga uchitongoburitsa kuti iwewe the French Revolution was a sudden political, social and economic factors or change which affected France from about 1789 to about 1799. Why I'm using the word about, ma scholars they anosiana pakutaura kwavanika. Then there are several factors which have contributed to the outbreak of the French Revolution, which can include an incompetent king, ambitious nobility, and the poor harvest. Ndiwo uri kunyora, uri kumaisa ese noti ndo awapoa in this case. But taking consideration of these given effects, one can take note of the incompetence of the king as the major impact to the crisis which affected France during this year. So some of the effects of the king are Onyora Ine, among others. However, despite that, the incompetent king sparked, the incompetence of the king sparked much to the outbreak of the French Revolution. One can also outlay the effects of the nobilities, for they have always supported the king. Also, one can take note of the poor harvest because it have contributed to decline in trade in France, which sparked the revolution. Wapedza introduction. And so when you are writing your points, Takat, we must include our point, our explanation, our supportive evidence and analysis. This spacer system. These are the issues anotaris wana examiner in each and every paragraph yako yawanyora iwewe. Izvi ndozvinotariswa kuti wazviita here pese. Saka mimi dzimwe nguva munototangira pasikola motoenda kuanalysis kana kuti unongopa point haiexplain yakutoconclude that's why we say yakacontribute. So for in this case togona kuti moreover the incompetence of the king sparked the French Revolution or emanated the French Revolution in the sense that the king was weak-willed. Why are we saying the term weak-willed? It means that the king was too weak to control his nobility and the clergy. The king was weak-willed to an extent that he failed to control his nobilities and the members of the aristocrats. To an extent that whatever he was doing in his political liberty or in his political arena was the minds and the manifestation of the clergy and the nobility. And the characteristics of the clergy and the nobility wishes were outlaid to principles of absolutism. They were now clashing with the minds of the revolutionaries who wanted a democratic type of leadership, while Louis was a weak-willed leader who could not suppress the clergy who wanted to explore my issues. Kuti kurambe kuinechi kune ma-effects ekuti ngakuve ne-royal absolutism. Saka iye aiva weak pakuti aichka kunoudza vana vakuti no, we are no longer want to use this type of governance in which you are revealing to me. I'm going to change it by force, by what? Because he was a king. So that made him to be exposed by the French revolutionaries. As the French revolutionaries exposed him because of his competence, they wanted to demote him from power to an extent that they started to form their own political clubs, and which also led to his execution. Andika vasvika pakutouraiwa. Saka that's how his incompetence led to the outbreak of the French Revolution. Uri kuexplaina zvinhu in full detail. Andika inini ndiri kuzowanza anoda kuti unzwisise. Then we are saying furthermore, the king was adhered to the outdated principle of legitimacy. Adhering to it means that his policies were aligned to it. For instance, there was no free voting system in France. There was press censorship in France. People, they had no right to information, especially to information to do with the politics. Are we together? At the same time, there was no voting system in France. As a king, as a competent king, he should have introduced the voting system because it was part of the cries of the French citizens. They wanted to have free voting system as explored by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, as explored by Vana Montesquieu, who wanted the separation of powers. But he failed to separate powers. He was saying he was the law unto himself. Instead, for him to have people kuti vavote zvavanoda, akaramba akabatirira pakuti hakuna voting system, hakuna munhu anopikisa government, hakuna representation in courts. It is adhering to the principle of legitimism. And these principles were very dangerous because the people now were exposed to different type of information. They were now having insights from the American of Independence. They were now having insights from the philosophers. As a result, the revolutionaries, they wanted to remove him from power because they did not exercise equality, liberty, and fraternity because of this principle. So according to David Thompson, the reason why the French Revolution broke out, it was the fact that people, they wanted to exercise liberty, fraternity, and equality in France, yet the king did not wish to grant that to the revolutionaries. Pakwatouya revolution. Saka mimi problem yenyu inochangira pakuti munotanga ngoti dead to the outdated principle of legitimism, whereby the kings, they were leading the people. That's how they are. How? Isu tuda kunzwa pa how pati kuti sei iwe wati aiwa outdated. Anda kuwaona ndakupa ma example. Ndakupa example kuti kwanga kusina freedom of expression, kwanga kusina arbitrary arrest. Saka principle ye legitimatism yaita kuti munhu afani kuva ne representative mukoti. Yeti vanhu vadzidziswa nemafilosofa kunzi no munhu anofana kuva ne representative mukoti, vakutanga kunetsa kuti tiri kuzvidawo. Saka tiri kungoti zvakafanana nekuti mwana weku next door aenda kunokwata apuwa pizza nhasi, aenda kunokwata mangwana apuwa bacon, aenda kunokwata mangwana apuwa bega. Kumba kwenyu munodya nemfushwa, munodya mangai, munodya munodya nhopi. Mwana anenge achida kuti ko zvamuri kundirambidza kudya zvazviri zvo high quality, ndo high quality food, ukandoregerei kukwata. Kana uchida kuti mwana asakwata harowe, anongotengerwa zvaari kufarira kunext door. Wabata nyacho? Zvafanana kuti uda kurovera mwana kuti usakwate iye uchingomupasadza nemaveji everyday, achiona nyama kunext door, anongodya. Ndo zvaiitika. It was difficult to suppress the revolutionaries. Taurirana? Right. Tabva ipapo ukundapedza. Then kunoko iwewe kana wakunyora dakuudza chinhu one. When you are now writing the non-affirmative side, taurirana, kana wakunyora rimwe side rema points, hazvisi kureva kuti takuramba zvinhu zviri kunoko. Uri kufanira kubuditsa kuti however, to a lesser extent, kana kuti however, flipping the coin on another side, kana kuti taking consideration, kana kuti turning up the pages, one can review that despite the fact that the incompetence of the king played a major role towards the outbreak of the French Revolution, and one cannot forget the justice of the contribution of the ambitious nobility and the poor harvest towards the outbreak of the French Revolution. Hauskuramba usaite unge waburitsa pachena kuti ndiri kuzviziva kuti namboti incompetence ya king ndoyakalidha to outbreak of French Revolution, but taane zvimwe zvatakuda kutaura ndomanyorera unoita however, kwete ungobva watoita unge watoramba ipapo tange munhu anzi I love you oti aiwa handisi kuda, next minute oti ndoda, hazvizonzwisisi kuti chii. Tukubatana, you must be very clear kuti izvi hatina kukanganwa but taakumbotaurawo zvimwe. Kana wakunonyora however side yakwe, tikuseva ma-A apa, hatisi kutaura zve-15 kana 16 marks, izvi ndezve-20 marks zvatikutaura panapa. Saka wadaro wakuya panapa pawakuti the nobility have contributed to the outbreak of the French Revolution. Why? They always supported the king even in his wrongdoings. Are we together? The nobility, since they were close to the king, since some of them they were generals, since some of them were ministers and ambassadors, they should have consulted the king in his wrongdoings. For instance, the king failed to deal with the issue of unemployment. They should have given him ideas on how he was going to industrialize the economy so as to introduce employment. As a result, the revolution was going to be averted. But for the fact that these nobilities, they failed to introduce such ideas, they failed to nip those ideas in the mindset of the king. As a result, the French Revolution broke out. So we give the blame to them. They failed to take their role in the political, social, and economic arenas of France. Tukunzwa, tatuvapa mhosva. Vaifanira kumudza kuti aiwa mukuru, kana kwaita nzara aiwa mukuru, kana kwadai, kana kwadai, kana kwadai, tichadai so. Tukubata. Then tabva ipapo tobva taenda pama issues poor harvest. Tikuda kutsvaga kuti poor harvest toiita sei? Andika kuti how did the poor harvest have contributed to the outbreak of the French Revolution? Yaka contributor sei poor harvest kuti pave ne-French Revolution. The poor harvest of 1789 have contributed to the decline in trade. Why? Because France, it is said